It is a real pleasure to be with you. I know I've spoken, I think, to several of your member outlets over the last number of years. My organization represents, as you know, independently owned and operated businesses, all of them small. We don't represent any publicly traded corporations. All of our members are independently owned and operated companies, and I would imagine many of your businesses behind some of the publications are, in fact, just that. Independently held businesses, or in some cases, perhaps not-for-profits. In any event, some of the issues that small businesses have faced over the last little while have just been unbelievably challenging, and that has been the focus of my public commentary for months and months. It's been an exhausting year running an association. All of us have been affected in one way or the other by COVID. I dearly hope and pray that your families have not been affected by the healthcare implications of COVID-19. I certainly can tell you, though, that almost every business has been affected by the economic implications of COVID-19 and the COVID-related recession that has come. We have been advocating at CFIB for the entire pandemic to ensure that businesses who, through no fault of their own, have been asked to basically shut down operations, or their customers have been limited from accessing them, that it isn't the business owner that ends up eating the entire cost of that. But these are pretty grave days, and I've got a deck of data to share with you about what that's looked like for small business owners over the last little while. So let me just share that now. Here we are. Are you able to see my my deck again?
Yep. Very good. Thank you.
Very good. As I mentioned, just one thing I should note on this slide. This is my typical intro slide that I use in presentations. If you'll notice, there's a difference here. We represented a year ago, when this slide was prepared, 110,000 small and medium-sized businesses across Canada. And as Q rightly said, we now have 95,000 members across Canada. That's how significant a decline my association has seen in members, because we go back to independent business owners to ask for their support again. And in many, many cases, the business is no longer there. Or the business is in suspended animation with a handwritten sign in the window saying that they're temporarily closed. And in many cases, even the business owner doesn't know whether that is a temporary closure or perhaps a permanent one. I'll speak more about that in just a minute. We're a not-for-profit association, and we also are a nonpartisan association working with all levels of government to try to push for changes for small and medium-sized companies. Let me tell you a little bit about what we've been doing during COVID. Sorry, I'll just go back a second. We have taken 90,000 calls over the last little while for help from CFIB, one-on-one counseling. It's a service that we provide to our members. It's the second big service after advocacy. 90,000 small business owners called us for help, often with respect to accessing some of the government support programs, but for some advice on how they can administer COVID protection to their employees. It has been a massive challenge, a ton of HR issues obviously popping up over the last little while. We did 151 webinars with members, with thousands and thousands of members participating almost every week during the pandemic. Our websites had almost 5 million page views. We did a campaign to try to encourage consumers to still patronize, as challenging as government's made it, to patronize small and medium-sized companies in retail, the service sector, restaurants. We did loads of surveys. If you've seen anything of CFIB, you've seen the incredible amount of data that we have shared with the public about the impacts of COVID. Media has been through the roof. 75,000 times my organization was quoted in the news over the course of 2020. And almost all of the major subsidy programs, the wage subsidy, the rent subsidy, the CEMA loan program, the provincial programs, were shaped by CFIB's input, either the creation of the program or the amendments to the program to ensure that they were workable for small companies. But where are we today? This data is as of February, and the data doesn't look a lot different when we went to our members in March. Only half of small businesses are fully open, and in fact, of course, that's now going to be less in the days ahead. Only 39% of businesses are at full staffing levels, and most worrisome of all, only 25% of just 1/4 of businesses are making their normal levels of sales. 75% of business owners are making less than is the case normally. And I believe over half of them were making half or less of their regular sales, which has put so many businesses in a very precarious position. What does this mean? We are expecting at CFIB that 1 in 6 businesses is at risk of permanent closure directly as a result, directly attributable to COVID-19 and the related restrictions. That means 181,000 additional businesses could be taken out over the course of the next number of months. Even as the economy starts to recover, we are expecting that many business owners will say, you know what? There's no pathway back to profitability here. I'm done. And then they're going to be asking, to whom do they give the keys? If that happens, that 181,000 businesses wrap it up, that would take with them 2.4 million private sector Canadian jobs, because of course, small businesses are huge employers in Canada, especially in sectors like retail, hospitality, arts and recreation, and the service sector. When we ask our members, so I'm planning to go through a few slides here, then I'll end the share and then open it up to any questions and have a great conversation to which I look forward. When we ask our members about their biggest concerns, obviously the economic repercussions of COVID are right at the top of the list. Worries that consumer spending, even after COVID is over, will not return or return to their business specifically. The sluggish vaccine rollout on this list, cash flow, the physical effects of COVID, the stress levels that business owners are facing have been through the roof. If you can believe it, of that 78,000, or sorry, that 80,000 calls that we've received over the last couple of months, we've had about a dozen business owners call us contemplating taking their lives. Our business helpline, which is usually set up to help with regulations, to help them answer questions about government programs or about HR issues, has turned into, in some cases, a crisis hotline for business owners who are at the absolute end of their tether. I personally had to jump into one of these calls with a business owner, a brand new restaurant owner in Markham, a Chinese restaurant, and the woman that runs the restaurant called me to tell me that after, she opened up right as COVID began, and her weekend sales, not her weekend profit, but her weekend sales were $10. And from that, she had to pay to all of the bills for the restaurant, having had just recently mortgaged her home to get the business going, had children that she had to provide for, and was excluded from almost every single government program because her business didn't have a track record. So the CEMA loan program, not qualified. The rent subsidy, not qualified. The rent subsidy, or the wage subsidy, didn't qualify for that either. And still to this day, those businesses are excluded from the programs, despite a promise on May 19th from the Prime Minister that problem would be fixed. These are the kinds of real life stories that are flooding into CFIB's offices. And with the third wave and additional restrictions popping up across Canada, we're expecting even more very, very sad stories just like that. What do our members want to see for a recovery? I'll go through these quickly, but one of the things we want government to do is stop some of the tax hikes that are just around the corner. CPP premiums went up January 1st, 2021. That meant that every employee had a larger chunk of their paycheck forwarded to government to put into their CPP, and every Canadian employer had to come up with a higher payroll tax contribution on their behalf. The carbon tax in Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta will be going up this month again. Liquor taxes are rising as a result of an automated inflationary increase. despite the fact that business income is remaining incredibly sluggish. So we want to see a focus on red tape reduction, some tax forgiveness measures, in fact, delaying some of the tax returns that and the filing dates that the government has imposed. We want to make sure that there is additional loan forgiveness for some of the government lending programs, and so on. We put forward to Chrystia Freeland a 6-point plan of the things that we would like to see done to try to help businesses through the pandemic and into the recovery. Principle number 1 is to extend and expand the COVID relief until the entire economy can reopen. This is a really important point. COVID, the healthcare emergency, will be over well before the economic emergency ends for small business owners. And governments are keen to end many of the subsidy programs because they're incredibly costly. In fact, if you can believe it, the small business support grant in Ontario closed yesterday on the eve that the government was basically shuttering the economy again. Since then, they've now expanded it for another week. They did that under pressure just today. But if you can believe it, many of these support programs are going to end even before all businesses are open. And really, my message to government is when they ask me, when can we stop the wage subsidy, the rent subsidy, and the loan programs, I've been telling government, as soon as you can stop telling Canadians to stay home, then you might be able to start to scale back the programs. But until you can tell and look Canadians in the eye and tell them to get back to work in their office, until you can tell them that it's fine to go out for dinner, go to a movie, go to the theater, maybe take a trip, including a trip across a border, when those things have happened, then let's talk about scaling back the subsidies and supports for business. But until then, you cannot do it. It would be really, really premature. So when we ask our members which subsidy programs they've used, about 2/3 of businesses have used the CEMA loan program. That's originally a $40,000 loan, of which you as a business owner got to keep $10,000. Under a pressure from CFIB, that's now a $60,000 loan, of which $20,000 you get to keep. You don't have to repay. That program's been incredibly useful, but needs to be bigger because the pandemic is going on so long. We've now been asking Freeland to consider expanding that to an $80,000 loan and forgiving a full 50% of that amount. The wage subsidy, that program's been working reasonably well, delivering less cash than it did in the spring, but it needs to be continued. They've now extended it until June the 5th. The CERB, many business owners themselves use the CERB because they had no other form of income as a self-employed person. The rent subsidy, though, Canada has had just abysmal success. They first, Bill Morneau created a rent subsidy, the Seeker program, that was a complete disaster, required landlords to apply for loans from which they could then offer a subsidy to the business, to the tenant. Nobody was using it. And so the government did pivot, created a better program, but still only 26% of small business owners are using it, and it needs to change. We've asked government to put a moratorium on all those cost hikes that we just talked about just a minute ago. We've asked government to, for example, on delaying the implementation of some of the new costly environmental issues that are going on, plastics bans, etc. One of the big recommendations that we're pushing forward to Ottawa with some momentum right now is a program to relieve small business debt. The average small business has inherited $170,000 in COVID-related debt over the course of the pandemic. And it's going to take them years to repay this. 76% said that it'll be more than a year before they can repay that amount. So let's look ahead. Say it's June. The business is open. They're able to serve some customers, but they're not going to make enough likely in June even to pay their June bills, let alone make a dent in the months and months of back rent, back expenses that they're now going to have to cover. Those bills haven't gone away. And that's a part of the debt bill that businesses have inherited over COVID. We've asked government, if it's looking at ending the wage subsidy, to replace it with a hiring incentive to allow small firms to reunite themselves with their teams As I said before, small firms are large employers, and we need to make sure that they can get back to the jobs that they do very well of creating employment for Canadians, particularly young Canadians and new Canadians. This is really, really critical. And so some support would be helpful in making that transition. Red tape reduction, we're pushing governments to announce a major initiative to lower the red tape burden on small and medium-sized firms. We've seen a little bit of progress on this during the pandemic. Yes, shutdowns have had a terribly negative effect, but in some cases, for example, allowing restaurant delivery to include alcohol, those kinds of things, governments are finally starting to say, you know what, is there a real reason we need to keep this rule in place? And some of the rules in between provinces also need to be addressed in that mix. We're asking government, there's quite a bit of momentum, especially with rumors of a federal election, for government to get big into the spending game again. And look, they already are in COVID support, but there's huge pressure on them to announce some form of fiscal stimulus, perhaps checks that would go out to Canadians to get them spending again post-COVID. While some of that might be helpful, our main message to government is, if you do that too soon, all that's going to happen is Canadians are going to use those big fat checks and whatever COVID support money they get to buy big screen TVs at Costco and Walmart because they're the only games open in town. If you want to stimulate the economy, hold off until at least the economy is open again and the small firms that have already had their butt handed to them are able to at least compete for whatever business. Look, there's been a lot of change happen over the course of the pandemic. When my parents are doing online shopping in Calgary, you know that we've seen some transformational changes. How many people now are going to do their shopping on Amazon because they get next day delivery, even after COVID is over, abandoning the small retailers that they might have patronized in the beginning? So those are the big recommendations that we made to government just over the last number of weeks. There's a variety of other recommendations that we've provided along the way on credit card processing fees and some of the rules used to determine eligibility for the lower small business corporate tax rate. Obviously, a defensive move to try to protect the capital gains exemption that so many small business owners are relying on for their retirement. A long list of changes that we want to see Ottawa make. So that's a little bit of the data, a little bit of the background on some of the things that our members have been experiencing over the course of the pandemic. I talked to you about some of the stories that we've been hearing that are absolutely heartbreaking. But every single day we have business owners, veteran business owners, calling our offices in tears, talking about the fact that their business that they've worked their whole career on is crumbling in their fingers. It's not because it's a bad business. It's not because their model is broken. It's because their model does not work in an environment where Canadians are asked to stay at home, where businesses are ordered to close their doors to the public. It's great. I'm one of these Canadians that can work from home reasonably well, and I suspect many of you can too. But we have to remember that about half of the economy depends on face-to-face, sometimes even physical touch with their client in order to make a living. And during the COVID period, that hasn't been possible. Those businesses need support because many of them are still viable businesses with strong business models that just don't work in a once in 100-year pandemic. And our goal as Canadians should be to ensure that as many of them as possible can survive until the other end of the COVID emergency. Those days are coming. We know this. We're seeing vaccines on the horizon. More Canadians are getting vaccinated. In fact, today it looked like I was searching for an appointment for myself as the age level is getting real close to me right now. In some markets, if you're 50 plus, you can get in Toronto, in hot zones, you can get vaccinated. And so I was hoping that I could find a spot with no luck just yet. But we know that vaccines will help us get somewhat closer to normal in the months ahead. We know that there are consumers, many of whom with salary jobs and government workers, who are better off financially coming out of COVID than they were going in. And that some of those dollars will be spent as Canadians crawl their way out of their basements and back into restaurants and to theaters and to vacation spots across Canada. But that road is still going to be a really long and bumpy one. And I really am hoping that all of you are doing everything you can to support local independent businesses in your backyards, in your neighborhoods. I know that I am. So thanks very much for the opportunity to speak with you. Really excited to have a discussion, my time is yours. So happy to take any questions along the way.
So thank you very much, Dan. It's just like amazing. I wanted to know, Madeline, how would we do this thing? Is anybody gonna ask? I don't have a control on the screen, so do you want to?
So people can raise their hand to ask a question, and then unmute yourself, and then no, you'll ask the question directly. So that's how that would work.
Anybody there?
On the screen.
Yeah, so everybody, whoever wants to, I mean, some of you are not visibly on the screen, but you can unmute and then ask the question. So
if
you're
there's nobody going there, yeah, if there's nobody going, I'm gonna ask the first question. Dan, if the Prime Minister just asks you, what should I do? Or let's just say Prime Minister tells you that for one day you are a Prime Minister. What are you gonna do? What would you do?
Yeah, well, look, if I were the Premier, there's a few things I would do, especially the Premier of Ontario, a lot of things I would do differently. If I were the Prime Minister, I would hustle to make sure that the support programs were fully delivering for businesses. He has said countless numbers of times to Canadian entrepreneurs that I've got your back. And it's true, there have been some helpful programs created. Had they not done some of the programs that they've created, the problems would be an awful lot worse. But it's also true that these programs are not delivering based on the size and scope and duration of the pandemic. The programs were just not built for a problem the size that many businesses are facing. So relieving the debt, as I talked about earlier, from small business owners, that legacy of COVID debt would be really, really instrumental. And that's going to give us the best chance to having a lift as we come out of the COVID recession. We need these businesses to stick around. If we don't have them, think of how many unemployed Canadians we're going to be facing.
100%.
If I were the provincial premier, I'd want to ask a lot of questions of public health officials about the lockdown measures. In the beginning, business owners understood. Like during the spring, business owners were incredibly understanding that governments were dealing with something brand new, something we had never seen before, and they were going to have to take broad brush measures that were going to have a lot of problems in order to protect society. And so they willingly killed their businesses and their business activity in order to protect society, to comply with the rules. During the second round of the lockdown, though, many business owners started seriously questioning the logic of some of these rules. And when we saw bizarre policies in Ontario, for example, as you've heard me talk about in the news a million times, that shuttered the independent bookstore, but allowed books to be sold at the big table in the Costco. When we see policies like that, they stop making sense. And that's when you lose the public. That's when you lose the public confidence in the measures that have been put in place. And I think that's where we're at right now. So they're locking down swaths of the economy with very little evidence that part of the economy is causing COVID spread. They're leaving alone these big congregate workplaces like Amazon warehouses where COVID is spreading rampantly, Walmart distribution centers left alone, but they're shutting down the little independent lighting store that may be lucky on a good day to fight C5 customers. I think that's an issue. And if I were the provincial premier, I wouldn't have ceded all responsibility to public health officials. They have their role. We should listen to them. But we also have to make sure that there's a common sense test that is applied in these situations. And I think many governments have abandoned that. The Conservative government in Ontario has been the worst. I will say one of the best performing governments, even though they're using a lockdown right now, is the NDP in British Columbia. The NDP, together with their public health officials, have worked really hard to try to keep the economy as open as is possible while combating COVID. Yes, they've had to use short-term lockdowns, but they have not used I don't think I mentioned this, but today, 300 days indoor restaurant dining has been prohibited in Toronto. 300 days. If that were an effective policy, wouldn't COVID have been long gone in the city of Toronto? Come on.
Well, you're a national organization. So is there any way that you can tell them that, look, what's happening the other side of the country? Couldn't you apply that? Because now we are in the environment that we are testing everything, and we are looking at to see how other people are dealing with the same issue that we are having. You're absolutely right. The only thing that I could see, one of the main things that's gone is the public's confidence. I personally lost. I don't know which is true and which is not, And this information age brought me so many information that I'm lost in terms of, as you just said that about the again shutting down the mom and pop's store, but having the big ones doing the going on. This thing I would understand the first wave. Yes, government made a mistake. But continuing on that one, so the people are questioning it. So I think the only voice we have as a small businesses is you.
Hugh, you're absolutely right. And we've been a broken record on this. I've said to Doug Ford, I've said to Dr. Williams, I've said to our Toronto Public Health Officer, I've just blanked on her name right now, Davila. I've said to them all, could you talk to some of your counterparts in other jurisdictions? They're drawing different conclusions, and in some cases handling things with better outcomes. Look, I don't want to sound like nobody in my membership is calling for us to become Texas. Nobody's saying let's rip away every restriction. People get that we're dealing with a deadly pandemic. We need to take it seriously. People are dying. But we've got to find better ways. And nobody, like the 2 weeks to bend the curve, well, that was what, 60 weeks ago. And now the curve's going up again. I don't know.
Yeah, true. Martin?
Yeah, well,
Alex. Alex is the one. Alex, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a concern that, I know you can't, in a sense, answer it. It's a rhetorical question, but one of my concerns, and as you are concerned with our Canadian independent businesses, and I agree with you. I'm extremely disappointed in the so-called conservative Ontario government, because they generally have tried to be pro-business, and Doug Ford was always on for pro-business, and yet it seems that the scales are so heavily favored in the direction of multinational and American, like Amazon and Costco, and these are all huge American, multinational or American corporations who are scooping up and basically almost killing. It's like if you almost designed a plan to kill off independent business, and we're going to end up with just huge corporations and franchises. You have independent restaurants, and yet Wendy's and the franchises that are funded by they have the big financial backing. Do they hear that? Did they hear that from you? I'm curious. Like, what kind of answers do what kind of answers do the politicians give to those concerns?
Well, look, the answers have been shifting, and as a result, the answers have been shifty. Remember on the big box store preference policy that Ontario put in place, the first response from the premier when he was asked why was he allowing non-essential goods to be sold at Costco and Walmart when he wasn't allowing them to be sold in the independent stores, his answer was it was supply chains. But then Quebec, as restrictive as Quebec measures were, they at least were fair. They said if you couldn't buy a T-shirt in the Walmart, in the independent clothing store, you weren't allowed to buy it at the Joke Fresh counter at the Loblaws. You weren't allowed to buy it at the Walmart counter. Manitoba did the same thing, so that put the rest to that. Then Ford suggested it was one-stop shopping that was important, and that was going to limit spread because you'd go and get everything in one spot. You wouldn't be going to the butcher, the baker, the candle shop maker. I don't know. It stopped making sense a long time ago. I still have not figured out why the Ontario government specifically created this unlevel playing field. I understand the governments wanted to or needed to put in place restrictive measures, but why you would put in restrictions that would punish one type of business, locally owned independent businesses, and allowed the big guys free reign over the market, in fact, a better competitive situation than they had pre-pandemic, is beyond me. The only explanation that made sense is that it was political. The Ontario government felt that moms in particular would be unhappy if they went for their weekly shop to Costco and they weren't able to buy the other things that their kids needed while they were doing their grocery shopping. That was the only answer that made any sense to me at all, is that it was purely a political move. The public health officials were opposed to it too.
I have a follow-up.
Follow-up.
I just have a follow-up to that, and
Sure.
it's a little bit diverging from your agenda, but only because recently they've been the statistics they've been coming up with, to my mind, they have unfairly targeted business in general when it's becoming, there was today the big news was that there was 150 ICU doctors that wrote a letter to the premier or whatever, concerned about their situation. But what I took from their letter is that what they're saying, the point that they're making is that it's complete, the policy of the government is totally misdirected. They are unfairly targeting business activity in general, when it's becoming very clear that it's workplace infections in large workplaces, factories, warehouses, Walmart warehouses or Amazon warehouses, which Amazon as a whole, that's something that should be looked at very seriously, because I'm sure you're aware of all the issues regarding Amazon, but so, and that there are different communities, racialized communities, where people are forced to go to work, they force themselves to go to work because they can't stay home, and they have infections and they're spreading, and that's how the numbers keep going up. It's not business activity, so that's extremely frustrating. I guess I'm just venting, but I'm sorry.
No, look, you're 100% right. In fact, during the retail debate, until retail was open, and thank goodness the government did not shut down independent retail in this round of the lockdown. They've kept it open at 25% capacity. But during those days, I was pointing out, it looks like we shut down the wrong end of retail. In fact, many were suggesting, and I was certainly right with my my cheerleading outfit on this, saying the case counts, the large case counts come to, like, we've been pushing people to buy online. Sure, that protects the customer because they don't have to leave their house. But what about the worker in that big online warehouse? In Walmart, the same deal. There were 600 or 700 cases in Walmart, 400 in one Amazon plant, and almost no cases in independent retail that were traced back to these small businesses. But those were the ones that were shut down. It made no sense. The other message I want to give, though, is public health officials were reasonably open about admitting that they were shutting down businesses, even in this new round of lockdowns, not because the activity in that hair salon or retail shop or even that restaurant was inherently dangerous, but they shut them down to send a message to the public to stay home. Yeah. And that if the public saw that these businesses were open, the message that they would receive is, well, I guess it's fine for me to have the house party. I'm not sure that message was what the public received. The public received, well, I can't go shopping, I can't go to a movie, I can't do this low risk activity, so I'm going to have this higher risk activity in my house. And as a result, COVID was spreading in personal contacts outside of any workplace setting altogether. So, this is the part where I think the voices were drowned out from at the table that was making the decisions. I know for sure there are cabinet ministers that are extremely frustrated, MPP extremely frustrated with how Ontario handled this, and the same is true across the country, but it's been a big disaster.
I see Alex Christian, our board member, has a question. Alex, go ahead.
Hey, Alex.
Oh, you're mute.
No,
Alex.
He's good now.
Unmute yourself.
Alex.
He did.
No, he didn't.
unmute.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah,
now
go ahead. Go
hear
ahead.
you.
Ask your question.
Yeah, now you hear me. Dan, don't you think that the governments on both levels are not so much interesting to keep the small businesses alive? I don't know what the purpose, but it's sometimes it looks like that because they don't explain exactly why they do that. They just do that, and that's it, without
Well,
clear
look,
explanation.
it's hard to disagree with you this year in particular. Government certainly celebrates small business all the time. I can't tell you how many speeches I've been at with politicians of all political stripes, Tory, Liberal, NDP, everything in between, saying that small businesses are the backbone of the economy. We need to support them as much as we possibly can. But then turn around and create punishing policies that seem to reward the big guys and punish the little guys as much as is possible. We certainly saw this with the federal liberal policies pre-pandemic related to the small business tax changes in 2017. The summer that I spent fighting with Bill Morneau when he was referring to small business owners as a bunch of tax cheats. One of the big issues during that campaign was the idea of passive investment income that businesses had saved in ways through their business that were unfair, that allowed business owners some additional ways to put money aside that weren't available to the general public through their corporations. They referred to it as passive investments, and that this needed to be taxed at a higher rate in these companies. I can tell you, we fought back against that, won most of the battle. The government caved eventually on that front. I can tell you, I'm really glad that we fought that battle. How many businesses would have immediately shut their doors if they didn't have some nest egg, some money saved in the business itself that has helped them ride this out? But that was the source of so much controversy in the summer of 2017. So I agree with you. I don't think that there's an agenda to try to drive out or drum out small businesses. I really think it is a lack of understanding on the part of political parties. And I would include all political parties in this mix. Governments and bureaucrats in particular think of small businesses as little big businesses. And they're very different creatures. Smaller independent businesses, yes, they may have started out one day with a profit motivation. But I can tell you, after talking to thousands and thousands of business owners every year, that motivation often shifts after a few years. And the things that business owners are proudest about are the contributions they make to the kids' sports teams, to the hospital fundraiser, to the employees that they happen to have on staff. And in fact, many business owners have turned down offers to buy their business from the big US company or someone else, because they know that the company that's looking to buy them is just looking to buy them for their client list or their product or their service, and that they will move the job somewhere else or consolidate it, and their employees that they've worked with for years and years will disappear. So yeah, governments have a lot of learning to do, and it's one of the missions that we have at CFIB. We've been doing, this is our 50th anniversary. We've been doing it for 50 years, and I haven't put myself out of work yet.
Thanks.
Good.
Yeah.
Any question? Anybody? Okay, then I'm gonna, oh, you have it. Okay, Alex, go ahead.
Well, if I'm allowed, then
Of course you are.
I'd love to talk to Dan for hours. I mean, and we really appreciate you coming on, Dan, and you're
Happy to do it.
talk about apropos today, like no other day is so appropriate that we have you. So it's really wonderful. I know it's maybe well, I'll come out and ask. What's for the Federation? What about so-called political activism? Do you? Because I'm so frustrated with our governments at all levels, and the fact that they seem incapable of making responsible decisions or good decisions, beneficial decisions. Do you, how active politically, or do you have to remain apolitical? I understand. I'm just curious about the.
Yeah. No, look, we are, look, I've worked for a political party in the past. I worked for the Conservative Premier of Manitoba decades ago. That was where I got my start after working on the free trade election back in, what was that, the late 80s. But what I can tell you is that everyone at CFIB, we have 400 staff. We're one of the largest associations in the country. Everyone that needs to check their partisan background at the door because we have to work with whomever is in power. And you know what? It's funny. I mean, just witnessed by this, there are many in Ottawa who think that we are like a farm team for the Conservative Party and that we're going to only say nice things about Tories and only say bad things about Liberals. So we've tried to disabuse people in Ottawa of that notion for many years. I think they would have a hard time making that argument after they've seen me savaging the Doug Ford government day after day after day in the news. We have to call them like we see them. And the test that I use is, what would I say? Would I say the same thing if an NDP government did it, or a Liberal government did it, or a Conservative government did it? If I would say the same thing, then I go ahead. If I would say something different, then I stop myself, because then that becomes a partisan comment. But look, we've worked cooperatively with the NDP on several files. There's areas of alignment there. It is not true that only Conservative governments focus on small businesses. Yes, I would say that they do well politically among small business owners. But I can tell you, in the summer of 2017, I had thousands of CFIB members who wrote to me saying that they were lifelong Liberals, but will never ever vote for the Liberals again after they saw the policies that Bill Morneau put in place. So, it's a weird world. This is Canada.
Yeah.
But we don't, no political aspirations on our part other than to influence all political parties in the lead up to elections, and of course when they become governments.
I see our board member and also Ukrainian producer, Yuri, hands up. Yuri, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Q. Dan, I'm a long time past CFIB member, so I'm very familiar with the kind of work that you did in the past.
Yes.
And I'm very much concerned with what I'm hearing here today. First of all, I have not really understood anywhere except for here today the rationale between why you could go to Costco, but the local store has to be shut down. Mm-hmm. I also don't understand. Again, first time hearing that. I don't understand why today I'm hearing for the first time the stories that you are talking about. And I can't say that I'm necessarily a CBC everyday viewer or a CTV everyday viewer, but I do read the Globe and Mail every day.
Sure.
So why is that message not out there? I'm actually personally ashamed that in our media, in my Ukrainian TV show, I have never mentioned these issues as being issues. Yeah. So where is the disconnect? I do know that, and our president is witness to this. I had to take Doug Ford to account for saying that he had addressed millions of dollars to advertising and specifically to cultural media. This was 3 months after he did this, and we never received any of that money. And he was sure that it was distributed. So, but at least we connected the dots, and that got taken care of. Yeah. Where is it at your end that we hear today, and we're hearing this today? I for certainly am hearing this for the first time. Why is this story not out there, or why are you not able to get to Ford? Sorry, I'm ranting. Sorry.
I'm not sure if there may be some disconnect here, despite our shared Ukrainian heritage. My mom's maiden name is Kristolovich, so from
you're from Winnipeg, of course. I understand
Ukrainian that. From Manitoba, absolutely. But despite that, I will say I am a bit surprised, because I have been doing interview after interview, as has my entire team, for month after month. I did 15 interviews today. I would say on average, I'm in the Globe on these very issues probably 3 to 4 times a week personally. I've done, I believe, I've done about 2,000 to 3,000 news interviews with the mainstream media since the pandemic began alone. And our team appeared in the media 75,000 times in 2020. So I don't think it's a lack of trying on my part, and I have to admit we've been working really hard to get the message out with press releases, probably 2 or 3 times a week, massive media pickup across the board. But clearly, what this conversation is highlighting is the need to do even more to get these important messages across to politicians through vehicles like you have.
Okay, I apologize if I'm using this medium to personally invite you. No, to personally invite you.
It's a reality check for me because I feel like my family's so tired of seeing me on TV, but it's a good reality check.
I would like you to invite you to more TV show, and to the Ukrainian one. If I could make an arrangement with you to show up, that'd be great.
Happy to do it.
Anybody else? If Madeline, you have hands up.
Yeah.
Madeline, go ahead. Go ahead,
Yes.
Madeline.
Oh, I think she just put herself on mute.
I'm
You're
muted.
okay.
Yes. So again, we're going into another lockdown in Ontario, and certainly you have espoused your views about the efficiencies of lockdown. Can you expand on that? And certainly we know with small businesses, as you pointed out earlier, it's just not making sense where you have the Costco's and the large box stores opened. And then you have the smaller retailers that are really sacrificing, their lifelong earnings in trying to maintain and survive and just keep above, the waterline.
Thank you for that. What I've worried about in Canada, and this is often the case, is that we've now moved into COVID theater, and it's about optics and sending messages to people along the way. And I understand that. Look, I'm super sympathetic to the politicians who have really ugly choices in front of them. And if I were facing public health officials advising me every day that if I don't do this, people will die, it's pretty hard to make the economic argument that, well, what about this business and their livelihood? Though I can understand why those aren't perceived at the political level as equal things. But like so much of the pandemic, we've now moved into COVID theater. Look at the border restrictions. We resisted that for forever in Canada. And then when we did put things in place, we just tried to make it expensive and ugly for people to take a trip, not to putting in place measures that are going to actually stop them from bringing COVID across the border, but basically just to punish people from taking international trips. The same is true of the lockdown measures. We locked down what were viewed as non-essential parts of the economy. And you know what? If you're running that business, if your whole family's income and every family member works in that business, it feels pretty essential to you.
That's a good point.
And for governments to then say, well, I'm sorry, we're making tough choices, but the manufacturing plant can stay open, but the small business, like the small retail, the small flower shop has to close. I mean, what the heck sense does that make? We understand that we have to make sure that Canadians have groceries, have to have pharmacy products. Canadians need to have paychecks, and we need to keep as many people employed as possible. But the way that these were, I can be incredibly forgiving, in fact, entirely forgiving of what happened during the first wave of COVID, when this was brand new. I'm less forgiving when we got to the second wave because we knew it was coming and we could have been better prepared. And love him or hate him, one of the things that Jason Kenney said that endeared him to many small business owners during the second wave of the lockdown is he issued a public apology to businesses across Alberta and said that never again would his government shut down the small guy while allowing their large competitor to stay open. They did the same thing as Ontario in the first lockdown. Many provinces did, but they actually realized how stupid and unfair that was, and didn't do that again in the second wave. So our advice, like, look, I have business owners who believe strongly that restrictions are absolutely necessary because they don't want themselves, their employees, or their customers to be sick. They get it. But they want to make sure whatever measures we're putting in place actually lead to better outcomes. And it's getting harder to say that the measures that the Ontario government and several other provinces are putting in place with long-term lockdowns, like 300-day lockdowns, are leading to better outcomes. It's the evidence is just not there.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we're into another month yet, so.
I know.
Yeah.
So Dan, what's your prediction? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, look, eventually we're going to have enough Canadians vaccinated that COVID itself, the disease spread will start to slow. I was hoping, in fact, had it not been for these bloody variants, we would have been there now, because even with younger people getting infected by the original COVID strain, it appears that they wouldn't be leading to hospitalizations and deaths. So even if there were more aggregate numbers of Canadians, even if infections remained at 1 or 2,000, but it's of a younger population that wasn't getting the serious health effects of it, I don't think governments would have cracked down the way that they are. We do know that the variants need to be taken seriously. I share that concern. I've got elderly relatives that I care about. My mother's going through cancer treatment in Calgary, and I wanted to visit her in April, and now that looks like it's not going to happen. But at the same time, we are eventually going to have enough vaccinated Canadians. I was just reading some studies that suggest that once you get to that 30% mark in terms of the population being vaccinated, the case numbers, the spread starts to drop, hospitalization rates start to drop, variants or no variants. We're not, we are starting, to be fair to the federal government, the volume of vaccines are starting to pick up. We're going to get there in the next couple of months. Once that happens, some of the COVID restrictions will start to lift. What worries me is that it's going to take many more months for governments to get to the point where they can say to Canadians, okay, it's safe for you to resume your normal life. That means going back to the office. That means going back to dining, to taking trips with the border open. That's going to be, I think, the more difficult political choice for governments to make, because they're not going to want to get that calculation wrong. And you know what I'm hearing from more and more businesses is, yes, just being open is helpful, but if you're being open and your customers being told to stay home, it's not like you're raking it in. That's still a pretty difficult scenario.
What do you think the work landscape would be?
I'm sorry?
What do you think that the small business landscape going to look like by then?
Yeah, well, get ready for a lot more boarded up shops, a lot more papered over windows, more street crime, because small businesses, and communities are, of course, the watchdogs for the communities. A lot fewer jobs for Canadians, particularly at that lower income threshold, for new entrants into the workforce, young people in particular. Those jobs are really good. We're going to struggle to get them back. Mm-hmm. Weirdly, though, in the next few months, as the economy reopens and some of the government fiscal supports for individuals remain in place, you are going to hear more employers complaining that they're not able to get back some of the workers that they let go. Yeah. Because, right now for part-time workers, it is a panacea. I use this story publicly. When I was 15, growing up in Winnipeg, my parents let me work one night a week, Friday night, to wash dishes at a pizza restaurant. I made Manitoba's minimum wage back then. But that 3-hour shift right now would qualify. 3 hours once a week is enough to qualify for $500 a week in EI benefits right now. So you're the young person saving for university, and your job is, let's say you were making $15 an hour, working 3 hours a week as a high school student, and your choice is that $45 a week for your paycheck or $500 if you're unemployed.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're going to struggle to get some of these workers back. I mean, we're not going to be able to pay them forever. So the EI system will have to self-correct, but we're going to have some transitional issues like you wouldn't believe.
Any questions? Anybody? Okay, yeah, Avril, go ahead.
Hi, Dan. Oh,
Hi, Avril.
I'll unmute.
No, you're
You're
good.
okay.
You were good. Oh, you just put yourself on mute. You were fine.
Oh, how about now?
Good.
Okay.
You're okay.
I'm from Nova Scotia, and
Okay.
I wonder how you assess the situation there, because it seems to me that their priority was to curb the spread
Yeah.
of the virus. And did that in fact work? And has much effect on small business?
Look, the Atlantic provinces have done enormously better than any other, but I'd say the chief contributor to that was the border policy, ensuring that other Canadians that may have COVID weren't coming to Atlantic Canada. They got ahead of it from spring break. They put the border policies in place, and had we done that early enough in the rest of Canada, we might have had a very different story. It has a little bit easier to do in Atlantic Canada. There isn't quite as much cross-border traffic as there is in Central Canada, but still Atlantic Canada was way ahead of the curve on many of these policies. The two coasts actually did that, I'd say, best in terms of finding common sense restrictions. Atlantic provinces and British Columbia, they tended to get, their public health officials seemed to be smarter. They worked with the local business community back and forth. I was impressed that Stephen McNeil used rapid testing in setting up pop-up shops to do rapid testing in the province. That was a smart move to catch some asymptomatic cases. They did a lot of they did a lot of smart things that really saved the bacon of a lot of independent businesses that were able to stay open for the most part. Yes, they use lockdowns. Again, I'm not anti-lockdown. I'm anti-permanent lockdown, like we're seeing in Ontario.
Any questions? Anybody? Okay, I'm just gonna ask Dan. Dan, why should we become I am a member of CFIB, but I want to give you the platform to promote the CFIB.
Well, wonderful that you asked. No, I just, I'm very grateful for the question, Hugh. That's very kind of you. Look, any of you that are independent businesses through your publications or independent businesses in other ways, you certainly are eligible for CFIB membership. If you're a not-for-profit, you're not eligible for a membership in my association. Unfortunately, it's only for-profit businesses. But we offer three big services. One, of course, is the advocacy work that we do that we've talked about for most of the evening. That is based on heavy survey research of small business owners. We do polling of our members on all public policy issues. All the positions we take are not my own thoughts. They are based on the feedback that we get from CFIB members through surveys, and then we advocate for those changes. The second big suite of services that we offer our members is the business counseling service. That's where if you have a question about your business operations, if you have a question about HR policies, government advice, or how to implement this COVID measure in your business, how do you terminate an employee without getting sued? We don't offer legal advice, we don't offer accounting advice, but everything in between, including HR, we do offer free counseling and support. I have 25 people who take calls from business owners every day to answer those questions for them. The third big suite of services that we offer are a variety of savings and benefits programs. So we negotiate deals that would be difficult for small businesses to get on their own. The largest deal we have is with Chase for credit card processing. If you can believe it, our members collectively process $14 billion in electronic transactions, 14 billion with a B. That's the sum total of those 95,000 businesses consolidating their volume, allowing us to negotiate better rates. We have a deal with Scotiabank, deal for shipping with ShipTime, some different types of insurance with much better pricing, with much better programs than are commercially available. So those are the three big suites of services that we offer independent business owners. All of this is available online, cfib.ca. One of the nice things that we're very proud of is that I have 200 reps across the country that will contact the business owner either by telephone or in person where that's permitted, and actually meet to talk about what a CFIB membership costs and what the benefits might be. The CFIB membership cost is a flat fee for businesses with no employees of $300. And then we ask business owners for each employee to contribute an extra $30. So a business with 5 employees might pay us, what would that be? $550. No, 3 times 5, 15, $450.
Beautiful. Fantastic. If there is no other questions, I wanted to say thank you very much, Dan, for being here. And I hope we are the last people that you are going to see tonight. And then you
Don't
go
think I have
home
anything
again.
else scheduled other than perhaps a vodka after this. I don't know.
Okay, so that's you got a nice one, something looking forward to. But anyway, I just wanted to say thank you very much for all the information. It was a pleasure to have you, and obviously it was very time sensitive to have all these remarks, and I think it was very informational conversation. And thank you very much. And I'm going to pass it out to our Madam Chair, Madam Ziniak, for the closing remark. Madam.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you very much, Dan, on behalf of all of our members. And we did record this. So if you don't mind, we'll put bits of this on our website. You know, we very much have been an advocate of COVID information coming directly to the multilingual media community. And unfortunately, it hasn't been as efficient as we wanted it to be, as well as the support in expressing the kind of information that's necessary. But we do, I mean, I've watched you on the air at least 3 times today. So I do appreciate you sharing your time with us tonight and speaking directly to our members, our board members and membership. And really, we look forward to a relationship, certainly with your organization. We are a nonprofit organization as well, representing, you know, many writers, journalists, and producers. And certainly, we're all, you know, continuing the fight with COVID, both on a business level as well as an information level, and of course, it's on a personal level. So we thank you, and hopefully, at one point, we will meet you in person, other than this virtual environment that we're in constantly right now.
Wonderful. Well, look, thank you so much for the opportunity. Real pleasure to meet all of you, some of whom I've met before, but please don't be shy to reach out if you are looking for either a regional spokesperson to contribute to a comment to a story. We have, I think, 40 spokespeople across Canada for CFIB with somebody in every single province. And of course, several people at the national level on our research team, etc. So I wish you all a happy Easter, happy Passover, and a great long weekend. I know we could all use one.